It's true that everyone needs a day off, and none so much more than the humble superhero. The poor things are forced into perpetual crime-fighting, role-modelling, do-gooder lives day in, day out. Isn't it only fair that they let off some steam every once in a while? Marvel thinks so too. Taking a look at their back catalogue of adult movies, and no, I don't mean Avengers Assemble or The Incredible Bulge, but their grown-up cinematic pieces, there's plenty out there giving our lovable heroes a much-needed break. Pulling together sex, violence, and a whole lot of spandex, these Marvel movies put the R into R-rated. If of course it stood for rambunctious, or randy, or just really inappropriate for children. I'm Ash from What Culture, and this is every R-rated Marvel movie ranked from worst to best.
Hey, just quickly to pop in before the list actually starts, I just want to talk to you about That Film Theory. If you don't know what that is yet, it's a brand new channel that's going to be about video essays, cinematic experiences, a bit more relaxed approach. Hopefully we'll see you there. You can find the details down below.
13. Man-Thing. The big screen adaptation of Man-Thing is so terrible that it should come as no surprise that most people have simply forgotten it exists. In case you need a refresher, Man-Thing is a giant foresty man thing that defends the land from dastardly oil riggers, like a modern-day Treebeard. As entertaining as that sounds, director Brent Leonard, much like with The Lawnmower Man, had a fundamental misunderstanding of the source material, rendering it pretty crappy overall. 12. Blade Trinity. What should have been a hyper-violent, attitude-filled mishmash of blood and spiky teeth became an all-too commercially minded, boring movie that seemed to believe the brand of Dracula was more important than that of Blade. The result is that Blade becomes a passenger in his own movie, swarmed by sidekicks who are distracting and annoying, and it comes as no surprise how obviously unhappy Snipes is with the material. It made money, but trying to be commercial and having an R rating was always going to be a difficult balancing act, and Goya simply wasn't up to it. I would say stick to writing, but Batman v Superman and Ghost Rider came from that. Maybe try being a barista for a bit. 11. Punisher Warzone. After the 2004 Punisher failed to kickstart a franchise, the decision was made to bring him in under the Marvel Knights film banner, which lasted all of 2 films with a conscious agenda to be cooler and darker. It's closer to the source material than the others and actually isn't that far from the Netflix show's aesthetic, but the fetishistic approach to violence is a little much, and it's all a bit too serious. 10. The Punisher, 1989. The idea of having grumpy Swedish Schwarzenegger, aka Dolph Lundgren, play the Punisher in the first screen adaptation of the cult classic comic looked like a good one. Sadly, the actual execution of the film left a lot to be desired. The film is nothing at all like the comic aside from the title and the fact that he wears black. It's little more than a grubby action vehicle for the dark-haired Lundgren to look mean and punch his way through various cliches. 9. The Punisher, again, 2004. 15 years after Dolph punished us with his version of the hero, Lionsgate tried again, this time making a far more faithful adaptation with a fairly modest budget and the surprisingly great Thomas Jane in the lead. Sadly, they obviously thought that getting their casting right with him was enough to neglect every other pillar of filmmaking, and the results show in the sloppy mess the film becomes. John Travolta's villain is one of his worst performances, and the tone is never self-aware enough to redeem the daftness. 8. Kick-Ass 2. Unfortunately, Kick-Ass 2 is one of those films that proves the law of diminishing returns, which is why it was so savagely mauled by critics when it came out. Whether it deserved quite so much venom is up for debate, but it's certainly nowhere near as good as the original. Some of the jokes and the attempts to be as outrageous as possible end up being a little tiresome, and much of it feels like little more than a rehash of the original with less focus and too much going on. Given how underused Jim Carrey is too, it's no surprise he took one look at the final film and decided to pull his support for it. 7. Daredevil Director's Cut. It might be better than the cinematic cut, but the director's cut of Daredevil, which is darker and more adult, is still not all that good. It does a lot to restore director Mark Steven Johnson's vision of the film, replacing the unnecessary importance of the romantic subplot with some actual grit. There's a better narrative, more logic, and a lot more personality, but it still struggles with some of the problems the theatrical cut fell down over. Some of the characters are undernourished, there's too much mugging, and it lacks that intangible satisfaction factor that comic book adaptations really need. 6. Blade. Well before Marvel had their grand plan for the MCU, and even before Spider-Man launched his first assault on Hollywood, Blade was proving that the films a studio would struggle to justify to themselves could be great and pull in loads of fans. Blade starts well, with one of the best ever comic book movie opening sequences, and while it fails to hit those heights a lot of the time for the rest of the movie, it's still very entertaining. It's also by far Wesley Snipes' best work, and the perfect answer to anyone complaining at how angry he was at having his input removed for Blade Trinity. This is absolutely his movie. 5. Blade 2. If the first Blade was good, the follow-up was genuinely great. Thank goodness that Stephen Norrington stepped away from the chance to make it to allow Guillermo del Toro his spot, because del Toro's genre experience made for a great marriage of dark humour, swaggering charisma, and the perfect tone for the character. Del Toro injected Blade 2 with a knowing B-movie edge, but mashed it with great action scene choreography, great enough to forgive some of the terrible CGI too, and a villain who's genuinely quite good, despite being Luke Goss from 80s pop sensation Bros. 4. Kick-Ass. In contrast to its insipid sequel, the first Kick-Ass was a bit of a revelation, thanks to its commitment to post-superhero commentary that has sneaked into the genre so much lately. Colourful, lively, and incredibly ballsy, it is the best vehicle yet for one simple question: what would happen if superheroes were real? And it does so while being hugely entertaining, very charming, and featuring an incredible performance by Nick Cage. No one should be surprised by that man anymore. 3. Deadpool. Despite the fact he's been in a shocking number of poor comic book movies, Ryan Reynolds is phenomenal as Wade Wilson. He understands the character perfectly, and that's all Deadpool really has to do to win some praise. It's far from a perfect film, as it has writing issues, the villains aren't great, and everything that isn't Deadpool could have been done a bit better. But as a showcase for Reynolds as Deadpool, it's stunningly good. His performance is hilarious, outrageous, and clever, despite the vulgarity of some of his material. And that's an easy substitute for the innovation people wrongly claim the film brought to the table. 2. Deadpool 2. Thanks to Ryan Reynolds' commitment to the character and his original vision, the sequel is a fantastic achievement in escalation that never loses sight of what made the original so great. Crucially, it also deals with all of that film's shortcomings, adding in better characters, better gags, and actual heart to go along with Paul's shtick. There are lots of surprises in there, including some great cameos, and a means to progress the character further into a franchise, which is absolutely no bad thing. And, timeline issues aside, there's very little to complain about. 1. Logan. After Deadpool's success, the newly R-rated Logan had a lot riding on it, not least because it was Hugh Jackman's last go at the character. On top of that, it needed to give this Wolverine a good ending, retire Professor X in a satisfying way, and be different enough to the mainline X-Men movies to justify its existence. It did all of that and a lot more. As devastating as it is exhilarating, it packs in heavy-hitting punches and gives us the claws-out Wolverine we all deserved but weren't quite able to see thanks to the X-Men's commitment to family-friendly material. It's basically an old western, with an old gunslinger taking his last steps and honourably protecting a young charge. And it positively drips drama and pathos in a way most comic book movies struggle to. And by God, does it earn its R rating.
Well, would you look at that? You got all the way to the end of the video and your mother said you'd amount to nothing. What are the chances? While you're here, why not watch one of our other many, possibly quite good channels, or watch another video which will be largely in the same vein as the quality content you've just endured. Go on then.